So there's been a lot of talk lately about the concept of a Steam console. Now, first of all, I want you to know that I am super excited by this prospect. I think it will be an amazing addition to basically what we have now. We have PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox. Why not have another person throw their hat in the console ring? But before we get all excited about what this could mean, I thought it would be cool to kind of take a retrospective and kind of look at the Steam machine, because this is basically the same sort of idea that Valve tried before, and it failed miserably. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the history as to the Steam machine, and we're going to also talk about some of the reasons why it may have failed. Now, you may notice me looking to the side on my screen over here. That's because I have my notes here. I actually did a tiny little bit of research for this particular video. So basically, you can look on screen, and we will go along through it. So let's start at a beginning. Now notice that this will not be the beginning of like the concept of the Steam machine and everything else. I'm just gonna kind of cut through the timeline and start at what I think is a very comfortable start for the beginning of this conversation. So let's go ahead and let's talk about it. So the very first thing is that the Steam machine was supposed to run on Steam OS, okay? And Steam OS is basically a Linux-based kernel, okay? So it has Linux as its base, just like Android and Chrome OS actually do to this day, okay? Now, so in September 2012, Steam released something called Steam Big Picture Mode in beta. And essentially what this was supposed to do was to take the Steam interface and make it more navigable on a screen that is further away from you, like in a TV, and it was also compatible with both game controllers and keyboard and mouse, so you didn't lose any of that functionality. Now, the thing about Steam Big Picture Mode, even though they realized that the demand for it was stronger than they expected, it still required you to physically move your PC into your living room. This was something that was fairly simple if you were using a gaming laptop, but if you had a big tower PC, by the time you are done unplugging all of the cables and everything else, it becomes a huge process. So came the idea of, we have a lot of software solutions to kind of make it easier for you to access Steam in your living room, but perhaps we need hardware as well. So then at the 2012 Video Game Awards, so this will be towards December, Gabe Newell first hints at the Steam machine strategy, okay? It will be Linux based, although you could still sideload Windows onto it if you wanted to. It will be sold, or it will be created by third-party manufacturers or third-party partners, and that's who would sell the actual physical hardware to you, okay? And it would run Steam OS, which would be their own thing, and it would also play Steam games, okay? So that there is at December 2012 when this first kind of hint is first made. Then we have to wait basically 11 months until the following year in September 2013 when Valve announces three key things. The first is Steam OS, okay? It is primarily designed to be used with Steam Big Picture Mode, okay? Though it also has a desktop environment which is again based on Linux. The second thing that they announced was the Steam machine, okay? So the Steam machines will come from different manufacturers, okay? But they had a few other requirements. Number one, they needed to ship with Steam OS built in and installed. Number two, they could not have any exclusive games. Number three, Valve will also, okay, this is kind of separate, but as an aside to that, Valve will also make 300 of their own prototype Steam machine that they will make in-house, and that will basically kind of function as the base testing environment for both 300 lucky customers and about 2,000 or so developers that they send this machine to. So over here, oh no, this here is the Valve prototype machine. So you can see here that it basically looks like a mini PC. I mean, it has a really cool power button over here. It has two USB inputs at the front, and it also had a loss of I/O at the back. I don't have the photo to show you that, but basically that's what it looked like. Now, the third announcement that they made was the Steam controller, okay? And so when they first came out with the design, this was the design of the Steam controller. It had two circular touchpads on the left and right, it had a center touchscreen right in the middle. It had 4 buttons, okay, to the side, and then it had 3 supplementary buttons at the bottom. Around the back, it also had basically back buttons. I think it had 4 back buttons around the back, and and it also had shoulder buttons as well. I am pretty sure. Again, I don't have all of the photos, but you can basically go look up the controller prototype yourself if you really want to get into the nitty and gritty of it. Okay, so basically this was the idea. So again, they made 3 announcements: SteamOS, which will be the operating system that would run everything, the Steam machine itself, which will be the console-like hardware, and the Steam controller, which will be the primary input method and would have to be shipped with every single Steam machine. Okay, so that one's important as well. Okay, so now in 2014, if I haven't messed this up, oh, before they sent, along with this Steam prototype over here, this was the prototype Valve controller that they sent to developers and everybody else to test out. You know, the 300 people that got their machine, this is the one that got to test out. So it was a very similar design, except they got rid of the touchscreen and they gave 4 buttons in the center there for the functionality. And you can kind of see the hint of the back buttons there. So basically, this is the one that you got if you were lucky enough to receive one of these things. Okay. Now, in CES 2014, Valve reveals that they had 14 partners, okay, for their Steam machines. So 14 different manufacturers. Now, this will include Alienware, Alternate, Cyberpower PC, Digital Storms, Falcon Northwest, Gigabyte, iBuyPower, Zotac, Webhallen, Scan Computers, Origin, Next, and Material.net. So as you can see there was quite a lot of people who were going to sign up for this. Now, on top of these different partners, okay, what could make things even more confusing is that each manufacturer had the option of choosing a CPU from Intel or AMD, a GPU from NVIDIA, AMD, or Intel, RAM that was up to 16 gigs of RAM, was supported, storage up to 1 terabyte hard disk drive, and then finally the cost ranged all the way down from $500 all the way to $6,000 in the Falcon Northwest Steam machine. So this thing over here, I think it was liquid cool, and it will cost you up to $6,000, which is a funny thing when we talk about the conversation around things like the PlayStation 5 Pro or even the idea of $1,000 console. I mean, this is essentially trying to be a console, and I don't think they ever came to market with this product, but again, it was kind of like $6,000 was on the line for essentially a console. But anyways, we digress, right? So let's go find our place here. Now, out of all of the Steam machines that were proposed and all of the partners, all of the 14 partners that you see here, the most impactful Steam machine came from Alienware. Okay, so Alienware Steam machine looked like this. And as you can see, it is a very sleek, very beautiful piece of kit over here. Now, the Alienware here symbol is the power button. The Steam OS is plastered on the front in this cool little triangular design, and it does light up. 2 USBs on the front, a lot of I/O at the back, and you could have it in a lot of configurations. Okay, so for example, let me go find it here. The Alienware was available from $450 all the way to $750, okay? And it started with an i3 processor, okay, with 4 gigabytes of RAM and 500 gigs of hard drive, all the way through an i7 processor with 8 gigabytes of RAM and a terabyte of hard drive, okay? So essentially it went i3 and 4 gigs of RAM, i3 and 8 gigs of RAM, i5 and 8 gigs of memory, i7 and 8 gigs of memory, okay, in case you just have the audio on. Now, as well as this, they were all paired with a NVIDIA GeForce GTX card. I don't remember which one, but it had 2 gigs of video RAM. And I think the 1 terabyte drive on the highest end there was a 7200 RPM hard disk drive, okay? Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier was the fact that all of the Steam machines needed to ship with the Steam controller, right? but the Steam controller was experiencing a lot of delays. So essentially, what ended up happening is that Alienware just ripped out the Steam OS out of this box, and they just sold it at first as a regular PC mini PC box, and they just had it install Windows, even though it did have Steam pre-installed. And what they did for that version is that they just got rid. They still had the triangle there at the side where the Steam logo should be, but they just didn't have the logo. They just had a blue triangle that was just there, just to look cool, I guess. But it was blank on the inside part where the logo should have been. And that there is one of the issues that Valve definitely faced, because vendors kind of felt, or manufacturers, I should say, manufacturers felt pressured, and they were also not entirely happy with the rollout because they kept missing deadlines because the controller kept being experimented with. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead. So in March 2014, right, after they've made this announcement and basically the manufacturers have presented what their boxes will look like, you have the updated Steam controller. And now you can see here that compared to the first version, over here, let me go and bring it forward. So compared to the first version, where you had a touchscreen, well, you have definitely lost the touchscreen now. The 3 buttons seem to be more where the touchscreen should have been. Okay, you still have the 2 circular pads, but now that you've lost the touchscreen, you have gained a directional pad, and the 4 buttons are put in a much more logical spot, because before they were put around the controllers, which definitely makes it look cool and symmetrical. But when you think about it, that means that normally we sacrifice the right analog stick for the 4 buttons, the A, B, X, Y buttons, right? However, you will have had to also sacrifice your left analog stick in order to have the Y and the X buttons, just because of the configuration. So this configuration here is definitely sleek and beautiful and good looking, but it was never going to work functionally from a gameplay perspective. So over here, we have a much more updated controller, which looks more traditional, but is, a lot more usable when it comes to actually playing games. And you kept the 2 circular pads. Still no joysticks though. So basically these circular pads were supposed to serve as your joysticks. Okay, so this is March 2014. So this is the updated Steam controller. However, it is still not production ready. And in fact, the production ready version will not arrive until 2015. Okay, now in March 2015, we have the final Steam controller design. Okay, so this Steam controller design has again made some big changes. No longer do we have a separate D-pad. Instead, that is incorporated in the left touchpad. The 3 buttons in the center are still the same, but now they have been refined. Instead of that D-pad at the bottom, we have gained an analog stick. And then the face buttons, the A, B, X, Y buttons are still in the same place. And then the other touchpad, it kind of loses the circular design that it had, which was particularly cool. But hey, at least it remained there as the touchpad. And basically this is what in the game will act as your right analog stick, I believe. Now, the buttons on the shoulders and the back, I'm pretty sure that they stayed put through the entire design, only changing for refinement rather than functionality. So this here is the final controller design, and now that the final design has finally been announced, now the manufacturers can begin to ship actual official Steam machines. So, in March 2015, Valve made a few announcements. The final Steam controller design, as you can see here, the Steam machine date will finally be released. I think it was November 10, 2015. The Steam link was announced. Now, I don't have a photo for the Steam link, so let me go ahead and see if I can just grab that quickly. So the thing about the Steam link is that it's a completely different hardware device from the Steam machine. And in fact, it has nothing to do with the Steam machines whatsoever, other than simply having the family branding attached to it. So over here, you can see the Steam Link was simply a box. And what it is that it is a streaming box, and it costs $50 at release. And it allowed you to essentially stream your PC and into your living room. Basically, it added almost like a PlayStation Portal, except it only didn't have a screen of its own and it was only connecting to your TV. Another example, I think also PlayStation also had like a PlayStation TV thing that they had, but you can basically think about it in modern days like a Chromecast for your PC, except it will only pretty much cast Steam games or whatever. At least that was its intended purpose. Now this thing here was $50, and compared to the starting price of a $500 basically or $450 console on the lowest end, this particular device started to make a little bit more sense. But anyways, we are going a little bit too far. All right, let me go ahead and bring back my notes. Okay, so the Steam Link could stream games at 1080p 60 frames per second, okay, and it was $50 like I said. Now in November 2015, Cyberware, let me go and find them. So over here, CyberPower PC. Yeah, CyberPower PC, Zotac, and Alienware were the first to launch their Steam machines, okay? Blah, blah, blah. 7 months later, Valve announced that it had sold 500,000 Steam controllers, and that includes the ones that were shipped with the consoles. As well as this, the Steam controllers were available to buy as standalone devices for people that just wanted to play on their PC but have a controller from Steam. So basically what we can insinuate for this is that in the first 7 months, they sold less than probably between 400 and 500,000 consoles, because I don't think that there will be a huge demand for the controller by itself, but it was definitely less than 500,000 consoles. Now, this might not sound too bad. 500,000 consoles, well, let's say 300 to 500,000 consoles in 7 months might not sound too bad, but it must be noted that the PlayStation 4 sold 1 million units on its first day on the market. 7 months later, they had sold 10 million units when they had been on the market, basically time aligned. So you can see there the disparity between the popularity of an actual dedicated console and then what these new Steam machines were trying to be. So that there is a little bit of a very brief rundown of the history of the Steam machines. And now we're going to talk a little bit about why it failed. Okay, so in no particular order, here are the reasons that I believe the Steam machine failed. The very first thing is Valve did nothing for the console gamer. Okay, so first we need to talk about why was the Steam machine made in the first place. We have an interesting comment from someone that worked at Alienware. And basically what they said is that the genesis for the idea of the Steam machine was actually in response to the changes that Microsoft was making with Windows 8. If you remember, Windows 8 took a drastic step away from what gamers wanted. In fact, it took a drastic step away from what every PC user wanted in Windows. As well as that, the Windows Store was positioned to basically run apps and to treat everything as apps, so that they would have a game storefront that will work a lot more like Google Play does. So for example, if you wanted Diablo 4, you will simply go to the Windows Store, type in Diablo 4, and it will come as an app, and then you will just install it from there. This prospect put a lot of threat to the market share of something like Steam. So Valve was kind of motivated to come up with the idea of their own branded hardware as an alternative to Windows altogether. Remember that these machines did not run Windows. You could install Windows on them if you wanted to, but they came out shipped with Linux and Steam OS at the top of it. So that there is kind of like the first reason why, or at least the most official reason why, even though this is not from Valve itself, this is from Alienware, but they were a close partner with them. This is the first kind of official reason why that really gives us a kernel of truth behind why the Steam machine was first invented. Now notice that reason, the idea of kind of keeping Microsoft at bay from the Windows Store, or even the idea of a repudiation of Windows 8, that has nothing to do with the console gamer. The second reason that I think that gamers were not interested is that this controller is shit. When you don't have two analog sticks, you are automatically at a disadvantage. Also, I didn't look at to like any customer reports as to whether how much people really like this controller or otherwise, but I don't really think that it was a huge success, because if it had been, I imagine that it would still be sold to this day. Okay. So yeah, I just think that this year is a terrible controller design. Nothing about this. The fact that you have an integrated D-pad into a touch capacitive surface just doesn't look good to me. The single analog stick design, the awkward placement of the face buttons over here, and I just don't think that this is a particularly stunning or good looking controller design. Even though I applaud it from being different than every other controller out there. Okay, now the second reason that I think they failed is that Valve truly had no control over the hardware. I mean, if we were to go back again to just the disparity between this box, which came at a specification that was all the way down to $450, all the way to a $6,000 machine. Valve had no control over the hardware that the partners put in there. They had no control over the pricing. They had no means to subsidize it. They had no means to optimize for it. So optimization here comes in two phases. Number one, Valve themselves could not optimize Steam OS for the hardware, because again, this was basically a hodgepodge collection of PC parts that manufacturers simply put into a slimmer case. So you don't have a target to hit. You don't know what's going to be available. You don't know how much RAM will be available, for example, for your operating system to run on. Maybe SteamOS would have run better on a machine that was 16 gigs of RAM or higher, but you don't know that. So you have to kind of work with the meager 4 gigabytes that was kind of like the lowest limit that we saw involved in this particular product. As well as that, developers themselves could not have a target with these Steam machines, because again, all of these specifications and options are all disparate in terms of what they have hardware wise. So in the future of Valve, you see that now they have the Steam Deck, and then they have Steam Deck compatible games. That's because there's basically just a single specification out there that developers can target and optimize for. But at this point in time, they made the mistake of basically letting everyone run wild with whatever they thought that they could basically sell. And so the developers could not actually be a part of that story, because how are they going to optimize for it? I suppose the most thing that they could do was to optimize for the controller itself, because that had a much wider reach. Everybody on PC could use a controller, everybody using the Steam machines could use a controller, so on and so forth. Okay. Another reason, so basically, they had too many options, is what I want to say. Another reason that the hardware failed is that it was actually worse performing than the consoles on the lowest end. The 450 the $450 configuration here in the i3, which was released, I believe, in November 10, 2015. At this time, it was at least $100 more than the PlayStation 4, and it was way worse in performance. Okay, so you are paying basically $100 to $150 premium for a mini PC that is running worse than a PlayStation 4 console, and the PlayStation console is a dedicated console, and as well as that, the Xbox One, of course, is also its own temptation over there, and so you just have nothing good going for it. Right. The third reason that I think it failed was that Valve could not use the economies of scale nor subsidize the prices, which is I kind of hinted before. But there's no economy of scale here because they are not manufacturing themselves, and also there's no economies of scale for the manufacturers because the demand wasn't that high. So they could never really discount these boxes to be, more in line with what the PlayStation 4 will be able to offer at the base price. Okay. The fourth reason that I also mentioned before is that no one could optimize for the hardware. Okay, so Valve themselves couldn't optimize the operating system for it. Developers couldn't optimize for it. The fifth reason is going to be, believe it or not, even though SteamOS was designed to play Steam games, because it was based on Linux and most games are written for Windows, only about 21% of the Steam library was actually available to play on Steam OS or the Steam machines at launch. So if you were a die-hard Steam fan, you will be paying between $450 to $6,000 for a machine that will only have access to 1/5 of the library on Steam. And those could be your most valuable games that are in the 80% that are not supported. So that was a huge, huge drawback. Another one was that I just don't know if there was really a real existing target audience. I mean, if you take a look at it, for you to be interested in a Steam machine, you would have had to be a heavy Steam user. If you were a heavy Steam user, by that point, that means that you were heavy into PC, which means that for whatever it is worth, you were already happy with your desktop environment or your laptop environment. You were happy with the keyboard and mouse. You were happy with your multiple monitors or your curved monitors or whatever, setup that you already had. And perhaps you were tempted by the idea of like, man, I really just want to play my games, but I want to relax. I want to relax on my couch somewhere. But then at the same time, you must remember that on November 2015, Valve also released the Steam Link. So for $50 and perhaps the price of an additional controller, you could just have your setup on your PC mirrored to your screen, deal with some latency from time to time. But why wouldn't you just go for a few, maybe $50 to $150 in, including the controller, rather than go for a $450 machine on the low end that would probably be worse than the PC you already had, which again was also worse than the PlayStation 4 console or an Xbox One console. And so it was just like, who is going to buy this aside from like a really enthusiastic Valve fan? Another one is another reason why I believe it failed is simply the Steam Link. I think the Steam Link cannibalized whatever sales potential this would have had. And then the reason number 8 is, believe it or not, even though Steam OS was designed to run Steam games, it actually performed worse than Windows at running those games on Steam. So because of the compatibility issues, because these games were not originally built with Linux or Steam OS in mind, it had a worse performance, usually by greater than 20%, when you played it on a Steam machine using Steam OS versus the same Steam machine using Windows. And remember that you can basically sideload Windows as if it was just a regular computer, because these were just regular computers. Okay? Now, number 9 I have as my reason why it failed is that it had no marquee feature. It had no exclusive feature to any of these boxes. I need to stress that for all intents and purposes, these are just mini PCs. There is nothing differentiating them. There is no hardware component that Valve has put in there. Nothing at all that made them any different from just mini PCs. And so what you could have done yourself is you simply have put a mini PC together yourself, which PC players are want to do anyway. Avoid the $100 to $200 to freaking $5,000 price premium over a Steam machine, and then simply install Steam OS, which was available to download for free on that PC, and then run Steam OS in Steam Big Picture mode, building yourself your own dedicated custom Steam machine that will be fully versatile and let you do whatever it is that you wanted to do. And finally, number 10 is the fact that the reason that this died is because Valve killed it. In April 2019, Valve quietly delisted the Steam machines from their webpage, okay? In November 2019, they quietly delisted the Steam Link from the webpage, and they replaced it with an app that had been released a little bit earlier, okay? And then finally, in December 2019, Valve basically ran out of stock on their Steam controller and they let it die. Now, that is horrible timing, because it could be argued that had they waited just one more year for the 2020 pandemic to fully go into swing and for lockdowns to be initiated and all of the things that the world went through, that the resurgence in the interest of something like a Steam machine would have been high. Because at the end of the day, when you take a look at this Alienware PC, it cannot be denied that this is a beautiful PC. I believe that if they had waited until the pandemic occurred, people would have been interested to buy the higher end versions of these things because they had a disposable income, because they could just sideload Windows. There was really very little to be lost. It's a beautiful piece of kit. It's already small and it's already made for you. It's closer in size to a Mac Mini than a full desktop tower. If you use it as your Steam big picture mode as a gamer, you are happy. However, if you decided that, hey, you know what, I don't actually game this way, you could then take it and repurpose it to just be a Windows PC. Then you can install your Word. Obviously, people were looking for computers and parts to do the work from home thing. This could have been bought for many purposes besides just playing games on Steam. But they killed it a year too early and they were never able to ride that wave. So what happens after that? Well, what happens after this is that Valve involves themselves in something called the Valve Index. Okay? And the Valve Index is a $1,000 VR machine. Okay, so again, here it is over here. For $1,000, you get to have what can only be described as high-end VR, even though I believe that nowadays people would not make the compromises that are included with this particular package, including having to install these sensors on walls and everything like that. Obviously wires everywhere. So that there though is a Valve VR, and I think it did fairly well for itself because Valve released it along a marquee title in basically having Half-Life Alyx. I believe this is still being sold to this day, and it has been at least a modicum amount of success. I do not know how much sales were to be expected from first what is a VR machine, and second what is a $1,000 machine. Again, when the PlayStation VR 2 was first announced, people made such a hoopla about the $550 price tag. This thing was nearly double that. But hey, I guess we all have short memories. After this, Valve decided to release their Steam Deck, which has been the most successful hardware to date. So before we wrap up the conversation as to how the Steam machines died, I want to talk about the lessons that they learned from the Steam Deck. Now, as you can see from the Steam Deck first, it is a truly first-party device. This is something made by Valve. It isn't made in partnership with a million other people, and therefore it has the ability to be subsidized. It has the ability to be optimized for. They also learned a lot about the control scheme with a much better controller layout. Number one, we have the face button somewhere where it is logical for them to be had. We have two joysticks. We still have buttons around the back. We have two touchpads, okay? And then we just have a lot of buttons, shoulder buttons, great amount of inputs. They definitely learned from the mistakes that they made with the controller while still bringing some of the original ideas that they had first wanted, such as the dual touchpads that they had wanted to put in. The third thing is that it has a locked hardware platform, okay? Much like a console, it comes basically with one configuration that matters for developers. It has an AMD APU. It has a quad-core CPU as part of that. It also has a RDNA 2 graphics card, and it has a 16 gigs of RAM configuration. Finally, the SSD will range from 64 to 512 gigabytes depending on the model that you take. And of course, there's an OLED model that basically keeps the base configuration the same, but simply replaces the screen with something that's a little bit nicer for you to look at. Okay. On top of this, to prove that it really does matter to have your own hardware so you can optimize for it, they released alongside this particular Steam Deck, the device, they released Steam OS 3. The difference between Steam OS 1, 2, and 3 is Steam OS 1 and 2 could be downloaded by anyone that simply had an internet connection. SteamOS 3, however, is locked specifically to the Steam Deck. And I believe the reason that they have done this is what we talked about before. You need to know what configuration you're going to have hardware-wise so you can optimize this operating system itself, which pulls a lot of weight. A lot of people think that the difference between an Xbox, a Nintendo, a Steam device, or a PlayStation is simply like what games they have accessible or whatever. But people do not realize the software suite that goes into it, like the SDK and everything else that the developers get to see, but also the things that we get to see. Some operating systems are more efficient than others, are better at performing other tasks than others. You take a look at the Xbox operating system, it has this ability for quick resume. No other software, not even Windows on the most powerful computers, have anything like quick resume. Nothing else does that. You take a look at PlayStation, and they have the advantage over Xbox of being able to record games at 4K 60 frames per second for essentially an hour, whereas Xbox can only do it for about 3 to 5 minutes. So their PlayStation has a much better DVR. These are software specific features that are tied to the operating system, so it really does make it a big deal. So when the operating system, when the hardware specifications for the Steam machines were all a hodgepodge collections of PC parts, Steam OS 1 and 2 could be released to anyone with any PC simply because it was never designed with optimization in mind. But I believe Steam OS 3 so far has been locked to the Steam Deck because it is well optimized to run on the deck, and you are not guaranteed to have a positive experience if you have specifications that wildly deviate from what the deck is, even if your specifications are more powerful, because there might be things in the operating system that do not know what to do with the extra power or everything else that you have or you may have in your PC. It could screw things up. It could mess up your audio drivers. It could mess up your mouse and your keyboard connections, especially if they're wireless. You know, there are just many other things that could be going on that has made them decide to limit the Steam OS 3 to this particular device. Okay, so this particular device also still supports a desktop mode. It is still based in Linux. Okay, so you're still going into a Linux desktop environment. I think you might still be able to sideload Windows onto it and force that to be there, but hey. Another thing that they fixed with the Steam Deck is the whole compatibility thing. So remember that when Steam OS 1 or 2 first released, on November 2015, it only had about 21% of the library that could even run on it. Now with the Steam Deck, I'm not sure how much of the library can run on it, but I do know that games that are Windows based and have no Linux compatibility whatsoever can run on the Steam Deck through a compatibility layer called Proton. I don't know anything more than that, but at least it makes more of the library immediately available to play on the deck. And as well as this, of course, because Valve knows their own product, they can certify games and tell you how well those games will run on your deck. Okay, and then finally, what we basically have is an estimation where we basically are looking at analysts saying that we have about 4 million of these things having been sold. And I think this came out in 2022. So that would be about 4 million in 2 years, which isn't a great success. However, it is far more successful than what the Steam machines were able to do. Okay, that's everything I have with you about the history of Valve and the hardware. Now, let's talk about what they could do to make a successful Steam console or a Steam Machine 2.0. The very first thing is that it has to be truly first party. You cannot cheat and rely on other manufacturers to make the machine for you. The second thing is that it needs to have better software compatibility without having to rely even on the Proton compatibility layer. It needs to be something that is actually, for its specs, outperforming whatever a console, a PC equivalent can do at the same price point. just like what other consoles can do. Both the Series X and the PS5 outperform whatever PC you can build with brand new parts um, at their respective price point, especially as we go further and further away from launch, and they are cheaper and cheaper, especially on sale. Number three, it can't have Windows. Windows is its own like hornetness of trouble and compatibility issues and basically just wasted power. Whenever you take a look at a um, a Mac, okay, and you take a look at a Windows-based device, the Mac will always outperform it in most tasks. And this was easier to do back in the days when all of them used Intel. So if you take a look at MacBooks before 2020, when they switched to their own silicon, and you go into applications, right? Especially applications that are kind of written fairly between Windows and Mac, because that's the only thing. Like third-party applications usually typically favor Windows, like a Windows build environment. So sometimes you have things that perform better on Windows simply because the developers are focused more on Windows. But pound for pound, if you were to use especially the native apps, like the ones that Apple has written themselves, like Final Cut Pro versus a Premiere, or Microsoft has our Clipchamp or something, you're going to find that Final Cut is just way better performing. And that's simply because the operating system is just a lot better at these particular things. Like, it's just a lot more performant operating system. There's some certain aspects of the operating system in Mac that I know a lot of people complain about, like the File Explorer, and I've never really liked that environment. Like, I find that actually managing your files on Mac is way more difficult than it needs to be. But despite certain weaknesses that it has, I think overall it is a less bloated operating system that is able to better utilize whatever hardware you put it on. Now that Apple has their own silicon, now we say that it's a completely different stratosphere of performance per watt when you compare it to obviously the amount of power that it draws, the amount of battery that it drains in the laptops, and also just the price to performance ratio. The new Mac Mini with the M4 chip is a titan of a tiny desktop computer. In fact, you could say that something like the Mac Mini would be an otherwise perfect solution for a Steam machine, except for the fact that it runs on macOS, and macOS doesn't have the best gaming performance or gaming features. Okay, number four is that the Steam console will need to attract console gamers. Again, I believe it needs to be a console first and a PC second. First, we're going to get rid of Windows, so that kind of just makes it not a PC in the first place. I don't think you should be able to sideload Windows onto your Steam console whatsoever. So if we take it away from a Windows, yes, I know that PC stands for personal computer, and that includes Mac, Windows, Linux, and everything like that. But you know, when people say PC, we typically mean a Windows-based PC. So I think if you get rid of Windows, you're basically keeping away a lot of people that already enjoy Steam, because most of them enjoy it through Windows, and most of them enjoy it through obviously the Steam program on Windows. If you keep Windows away, you are not locking them out, but you're putting a barrier there. The second thing is that I don't know if there are that many PC gamers that would want to downgrade their PC setup, right? Because we have to say that, because all of them are part of the master race, and all of them have like, you know, NVIDIA Titans GPUs in there. You know, all of them have like super powerful PCs that they bought off of Craigslist for like, you know, $5, a pack of chewing gum, and some speed shine. But you have a situation there where again it's like, who is the target audience? Who is a PC gamer who would want to make who want to leave the things that they love about, you know, the PC environment, especially because it's not just about running the games, but it's things like, will you be able to run the mods? Will you be able to run every other cheating program that they love to run? But and then you want to pick up some of the disadvantages that consoles have, like a locked hardware box that you cannot upgrade yourself. Would you want to then, you know, be basically best used on a TV screen with a controller? Because a lot of them prefer keyboard and mouse. I still expect that a Steam console would include keyboards and mouse support, but the couch, the physical location, right, the physical environment, the sitting on your couch environment is just not great for keyboard and mouse setup. It just takes so much space, and you have instability. Unless you're going to then have some kind of like mini desk that you can pull to yourself, it becomes a whole thing. So instead of appealing to the PC crowd, I think that the Steam console should make a play for the console crowd. And if you are going to make the play for the console crowd, then I believe you're going to need point number 5, which is a secret sauce. You're going to need to be more than just a mini PC with Linux. I think you're going to need exclusives. Now, Valve isn't a stranger to exclusives because Half-Life Alyx is an exclusive game. And I believe that even the Half-Life and Portal, all of those are available on PlayStation, like if you go back enough. But Half-Life Alyx is an exclusive game at the moment, and there's no reason that they could not have ported it to the PlayStation 5 if they wanted to. I simply believe that they didn't want to. And so I think you're going to need more things like that, because the console gamer is there for the exclusives. They appreciate the exclusives. What can I get on your box that I can't find anywhere else? Especially if it's the shit. Like if it hits, it hits. So I think that they will actually need to make more games, and this could actually be a great news for gamers, because if they make games for the Steam console, they will obviously release it on PC as well. And it could finally give us Portal 3, Half-Life 3, Team Fortress 3, all of these games that Valve has been terrified of the number 3 for, as well as bringing new franchises and having them work in an exclusive way with third-party software studios and everything like that, in order to again attract people to their brand. I also think that they will obviously need to redo the Steam controller. It can't just be the same thing that they released before, but I'm sure that they've already learned those lessons. But yeah, that is essentially what I think about the Steam kind of like environment. But by the way, I don't know if I showed the Steam Deck before. I think I may have talked over it thinking that you could see it, but here it is, just in case you guys need to have a reminder what the deck looks like. And let's see, the Valve index as well. I think like I didn't show it. I think I was still just on my face on the screen. Here's what the index look like, and these are the sensors that you put on the wall. This is the controllers, and obviously that's the headset there. Okay, so that's it for the video, guys. I just want to say a few things about this idea. Again, I'm excited for it. I think that people underestimate in a real way how valuable the living room position is. Again, the most important storefront that you can have is, as far as these companies are concerned, is your phone. Your phone is a mobile storefront that works with you everywhere. And now companies are vying for the ability to sell directly to you on your phone, right? Like if Microsoft is able to essentially convince all of these judges that Google shouldn't take a 30% cut from whatever is gone through the particular Android operating system, then best believe that there will be other manufacturers other app makers that are also like, hey, we have an ecosystem that we can sell to you. We don't want to give Google 30% either, so let us not do that. Most important, storefront. But the thing about that storefront is that it is fairly personal. Like, I know that parents lend their phone to kids and everything like that, but let's just, kind of take a look at I guess a teenager or like a 20 or 30-year-old that, doesn't do that, has some kind of personal boundaries. The good thing is about it is that you go ahead and you carry it all the time with you. The bad thing is that it's basically just you. Compare that to the second best spot, which is the living room. Any console, or I guess a PC, but typically it has been consoles, that is on your TV. Yes, it has a disadvantage of being fixed in place, but now it has the advantage that it can actually sell to more than just you. If your partner is playing on the TV and you see a game that you like, you could be tempted to buy that game on your own account or on your own console or in a different console. Basically, you could be tempted to acquire that game yourself because you've seen it happen. Typically, this doesn't really happen with like a mobile phone. On top of that, if anyone walks in and sees you play a particular game, they could also be tempted. So the good advantage there is that the living room position is a place that appeals to everyone in the household, whether they live there or not. Another advantage is simply that, for let's say that you had children, right? Um, and you've got the single console. That console could sell to you, it could sell to your children, it could sell to your partner, it could sell to your guests, it could sell to your family members when they come over, because all of them might be interested in different games, but all of those games are visible from that prime location. So that is why I have always hesitated to think that other people will not jump in the space. I just think that over time, you're going to see that that living room position is just more and more contested for. Now, to prove that point, know that consoles are not the only way to put a storefront on your TV. Chromecast devices, Android Fire, Amazon Fire TVs, Apple TV. Why do you think that these little dongles are made to you? Can basically replace the entire operating system of your TV, are typically faster, sleeker, and better, and they only cost you maybe $99 max, maybe $200 max for like the most expensive one. But the point is, like, the Roku's, the like I said, the Chromecast, the Fire TVs, the Apple TVs, all of those devices, they are so affordable to you, they are such good value for you because they present you a storefront on the big screen. So again, Microsoft, for example, doesn't have a storefront on the big screen. Yes, you could technically put a PC there, but that's on the slick device. They don't have a mobile phone. They don't have a Comcast dongle or an Xbox dongle for you to plug at the back of your TV. So all they have for the living room position is the console. I don't think that they are going to shy away from that console. I think they are always going to try to have a presence there in your living room. And so finally, Valve. I think Valve is going to make a play for it. I hope that they do. And I hope that when they do, they come out with a $1,000 console. First of all, I don't want to hear it, okay? They sold you the Valve Index, which was a niche piece of kit, right? It was neat, but it was niche. And that was good enough for $1,000, and no one batted an eye. Yes, people said it was expensive, but they were like, yeah, it gives you the performance and it gives you an experience that is kind of like commensurate with the price that it charges. So create a $1,000 console that is commensurate with the price that you charge. This should be much more powerful than even the PlayStation 5 Pro or a potential PlayStation 6. It should offer advantages in terms of the Steam operating system, including free online. And that might be why they charge you more, because if they're going to give you free online infrastructure, maybe they're going to be like, hey, we charge you upfront, but then we don't charge you again for the internet, which I think a lot of, PC fans will actually rally behind. I think it will have a tremendous amount of a library, even though, again, backwards compatibility or being able to simply play your Steam games isn't enough. I think it definitely needs exclusives of its own, even if those exclusives are shared on your big boy PC. But it needs exclusives from the other consoles, is what I mean. And yeah, I think that they can just make it something really, really great. Obviously, it could have like fantastic compatibility with the Steam Deck, being able to use a Steam Deck, for example, as a remote play device. So you could have a situation where you have a Steam console, and that is a really powerful device, more powerful than the PlayStation 5 Pro. And then when you are away from it, but you have your deck, instead of running the game natively on your deck, you could connect immediately to your Steam console, play it at the higher resolutions and fidelities and ray tracing and all of the settings. But now you are streaming at 800p, because that's really all the Steam Deck can do, and you get it at 60 frames per second, and it is great. So yeah, I hope that they step into the market in a big way. I'm in support of it. Do I think it's going to happen? Doubtful, because people do not realize that I just don't think that the PC gamers will come over. I don't think that PC gamers will come over en masse to support this device as a PC centric device or like a PC adjacent device. I think it will have to be seen as a console centric device. And in this environment, Valve has PlayStation to contend with, and Valve has Xbox to contend with. And as damaged as Xbox's reputation has been, and as woeful as their sales have been, it's hard to imagine that Valve will do any better out of the gate, especially because I believe they will not want to subsidize the console, and they will want to put a higher end product rather than a lower end one. When I take a look at the deck and I take a look at the index, those are fairly high end machines. You know, the index compared to the PlayStation VR, which is what was out when it first released, it was over twice the price. The PlayStation VR came out at 400 or something like that, and so this thing was, you know, $1,000 more than twice the price. When I take a look at the Steam Deck again, compared to what was the closest equivalent at the time in the Nintendo Switch, it was at least 1.5 times the price. So Valve is not afraid on playing on the higher end of the scale. And so I believe that if they come out with a console, you are looking at the minimum of $700 and probably a maximum of like 1,500 at the highest end, and they're probably going to shoot for somewhere in the middle. So I think $1,000 is a pretty good bet. But anyways, these are all of my thoughts on the potential Steam console. With a history about the Steam machines, let me know, did you know about the Steam machines and why they failed? Why do you think they failed? Because honestly, those were just my thoughts and opinions. They were not like anyone that kind of researched it and told me like, oh, this is why he failed. But yeah, let me know. Let me know what you think about the discussion. Let me know what you think about a potential Steam Machine 2.0 or a Steam console. Let me know if you think that they were going to release another VR headset. Because I think that if they release a console, especially a high-end $1,000 one, they should refresh the Valve Index now that we no longer need to have sensors on the walls. And even if they kept it at $1,000, it will still be a super powerful thing. So you know what? I just want them to come correct. I want them to come, and I want them to want the top spot. I don't want this thing where they're like, oh, we're trying to slide into second place, or oh, we're trying to test the waters. Nah, bruh. If you come from PlayStation's head, okay? Come to sell $100 million console. Come for that title, okay? Go for the belt. And then hopefully after this, you know, we can have stronger competition in the place. Because at the end of the day, I think that, especially if, like I said, they are going to compete at the higher end of the scale in terms of what consoles are, I believe that we all get to benefit from it, because gaming deserves, you know, the money. It's an art form that deserves the money that we invest in it. It deserves to have like better and better hardware that pushes things forward. It deserves to have a development community that is now used to things like SSDs and really well optimized operating systems, because Windows is trash at being like a good, you know, unbloated operating system. So imagine that, you know, Steam OS 4.0 comes out with this console, and then it's so good that it actually convinces people to install it on their regular PCs, and now we could have a lot of efficiencies that Windows just doesn't have, because Steam OS is basically just built to run Steam games. So again, it will be fantastic all around. Okay, enough talking. I'm done. Let me know what you think. Talk to you later.